Well, good morning, everyone. Buenos días a todos. And welcome to day 2 of the Hemispheric Security Conference. Yesterday, we had a fantastic discussion, various panels about the importance of economic security as national security and the power of partnerships in order to deal with these transnational issues that are being felt from South America to Central America and even to the Caribbean. And I think one of the quotes that have really stuck with me yesterday was a quote from the Minister of Defense of Paraguay, which is, "Juntos estamos mucho más fuertes," right? Together we are much stronger. And it is a great pleasure to have for our opening remarks someone who has really made partnerships a central pillar of his service, his over 4-decade service in the U.S. Navy. And I had the very grand privilege of working for him at U.S. Southern Command. This is the former Commander of U.S. Southern Command, Admiral Craig S. Fowler. Sir, the floor is yours.
Good morning. It's great to be here at FIU. It's always maybe somewhat risky being the first speaker. Leland's like, we got to start a little late. There's a lot of folks still coming in the door. I said, well, starting late breeds bad habits, but okay. Whatever Leland says, I do. I'd like to thank FIU. It's a great school. It's focuses correctly on student success and outputs and outcomes. It has a super culture. It's hungry like a startup and as sophisticated as any Ivy League school in the United States. And the conferences like this prove that FIU is a thought leader. So big round for FIU. Of course, within FIU, there's the Green School and its director, Dr. Shlomi Dinar, Dr. Shlomi Dinar will be here later and have some remarks and closing remarks this afternoon. And then the Jack D. Gordon Institute, which is really an engine for action within the Green School. And you heard yesterday from Director Brian Fonseca, who many of you know, that he's done a tremendous job with that institute. And of course, Leland, who's been the real catalyst in his team for this great event. Partnerships, the power of partnerships. Theme, day 1, it's going to be the theme, or it should be the theme of day 2. And represented yesterday and today in this room are many of those partners, our Department of State, SOUTHCOM, got Greg Marvel here, the longtime policy advisor at SOUTHCOM. There's a depth of knowledge in tremendous professionals like Greg that make a difference day in and day out. SOC South Tayeda, who we just briefly had a great chat here. I met in Argentina a few years back. Our diplomatic corps was present yesterday and last night at the social, and members of the press. Josh Goodman was here yesterday from the AP. We've got to consider the media as part of our partnerships as we work to get information out. And our next speaker is going to have a lot to say about information and disinformation. Inspiring range of speakers and panels. Where's Dr. Griffiths? Is he here? Yep, there he is. I love it. I love it. Problems without passports. It's so catchy. You should be putting it on coffee cups and T-shirts. Maybe you already are. You better get it copyrighted. But it's so true. When we prioritize one region or one problem, we risk catching the complex interconnection of all those problems. We heard this yesterday. Transnational criminal organizations. If we ask a partner, and when I sat down with partners as Commander of U.S. Southern Command, that was consistently at the top of their list. Malign state actors, the PRC. We cannot put our head in the sand with respect to the PRC's malign intentions. But it's not the way to start a conversation with a partner when it's their #1 trading partner and our #1 trading partner. So we have to have a way to talk about this and take action that makes a difference. Russia, Iran, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, nation state actors. Haiti, what a tragedy. We don't talk about it enough and we don't take action enough. We'll hear later today some on Haiti. In the 3 years as I was SOUTHCOM commander, went to Haiti twice, and it truly was the most insecure, a tragic example of all insecurity vectors that I visited in my 38-year career, 88 countries globally. Natural disasters, climate change, food insecurity, economic security has to be considered as national security, to name just some. It was an excellent start. Today will be, as we accelerate in today, it'll be a great way to start putting some ideas on how we get to sustainable security. We heard from General Laura Richardson, the U.S. Southern Command Commander, about our democratic neighborhood and team democracy for the Americas. It's a great theme. That proximity and what the region brings that feeds and fuels the world. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that proximity and that promise. People, it matters. There's so much cultural affinity, so many connections. My wife's family's from Brazil, and the connections in this room and in Miami and throughout this country are so important, and they matter. We said proximity. We'll say it again. That matters. We should take stock in how that matters. The term Monroe Doctrine should be banned forever. We should treat the proximity with the respect that good neighbors in good neighborhoods treat each other. I vote for Good Neighbor Policy 2.0 as a way to think about how we advantage that proximity. A lot of talk about first island chain when people speak of the PRC in Taiwan. So if you take the arc of the first island chain and you put the pen here on Miami, that captures 2/3 of this whole region, just to kind of flip geography a little bit. We don't want to treat our neighbors like China's treating theirs. We want to be good neighbors, all of us. And I think that's mutual. Power and resources, food, water. 30% of the water of the world is in this region, with just, if you take Mexico, Canada, the U.S. out, with just 8% of the population. Yet all this is under assault by many, many threats. As a SOUTHCOM commander, I would talk about a vicious circle of threats. That's too simple of a model. It's a spider web of threats, complex, interconnected, international, multidimensional, and at the center of that is the PRC. As our strategic documents here in the U.S. state, and as speakers said yesterday and will say today, and as many of our combatant commanders have said, the PRC, not China, not the Chinese people, the PRC, the Communist Party of China, is the #1 strategic threat to the globe, not the U.S., not our neighbors, but to the way of life we enjoy in democracy. Yet, many cases I run into views the PRC as just an economic threat or an economic challenge. I think that's a myth. And there's many examples and cases, real facts, that we should embrace and learn to bust that myth. The proliferation of space stations outside of China, outside of PRC, that are in this hemisphere. This hemisphere matters. 5G, cell towers, seaports, and the list goes on. A recent recent Newsweek article talked about some of the activities that are happening in the Caribbean. Yet you can't sit down with a partner and shout China bad and expect to get any action. We have to get to the root causes. And that's why conferences like this are so important. Yesterday, a friend, colleague, former president of FIU, Dr. Mark Rosenberg, and I were talking about the nature of these problems. And I think we all agreed that we have to spend more time analyzing the problems and asking good questions, and less time just talking, more time listening. So the key question is, our workforce, are our researchers, are our academics prepared for the question? Do we have the right education? Do we have the right training? Do we have enough of it? Have we blended regional studies with technology studies in a manner that we can really get at a conversation that has impact? Or are we shouting and talking about it in such a high level that we don't really understand solutions? Einstein said if he had 60 minutes to save the world, He spent 55 of that analyzing the problem and understanding the context. When I worked for Secretary Mattis, often the first question he would ask a briefer, no matter what country we're going to, is, what's the last book you read about that country? What's the last poem you read from that country? What's the last song you listened to from the country? We have to have a better cultural understanding and context. So, key question, are we taking the right approach to these threats? Are we taking a partner view? We heard from Commodore Anderson yesterday, partnerships, 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 and how we really need to flip the paradigm and listen. I couldn't agree more. But are our policies such that it will really permit that open conversation, where the policies sometimes thwart us from having the conversations that are necessary? And are the partners as willing to have that open conversation as we are? We talk a lot about more intel sharing, more sharing of information. I couldn't agree more, but that's a two-way street. And it starts with bilateral relations and multilateral relations, and it's measurable, and we can get after it. We've got to move forward on that. So part of understanding the threat is understanding the limitations, the structures, the history of our fellow democracies, so we can get agreements that work and last and allow us to have a true, more lasting, durable partnerships throughout the hemisphere. Yesterday, we heard about the threat that TCOs, transnational criminal organizations, pose, how rapid they've expanded. In military, we talk about end strength, which is a number of people, number of weapons, how much financing. If you look at Central America, the transnational criminal organizations have 3 times the end strength, weapons, budget than the security forces they face. That's a tragedy, and it's getting worse. So key question, if the threat's that bad and it's grown that much, why haven't existing approaches worked? Why aren't we getting at the root cause? Should we completely realign regional and U.S. approaches? Should we less emphasize eradication and interdiction? And as Dr. Griffith said, focus more on police, prosecutors, and prisons, institutions. I'll add a 4th P, Dr. Griffith, principles, human rights training. And notice I haven't mentioned military one time. These strong institutions are the real bulwark of hope for the people in the region and for the erosion of democracies, which we've heard yesterday and we'll hear more about today. And we spend a lot of time talking about the importance of information and the narrative, owning the narrative. And I know State Department has recently opened an important office here in Miami to work and accelerate the spread of factual information, not misinformation. But are we truly taking that understanding of disinformation and information in a call for action? What will we do as we walk out of the conference this afternoon? They're important, these conferences, and none so more important than this. But often we're talking to the converted here in the audience and those that want to listen in. How do we expand the narrative? How do we take that forward? How do we take action? And nothing speaks more about a strategic narrative than what we spend our time on and what we do, our actions. So what will we do differently after this conference going forward? That's the challenge. What will we do with the information we've gained to make a difference? What important questions will we ask? And how will we ourselves learn and educate ourselves so we can have a better contextual understanding of the fabric underneath those questions so that our solutions actually make a difference? And this isn't to disparage all the hard work that I did for 38 years and others at SOUTHCOM are doing, or State Department, or the ministries that are represented here. It's to say it's not sufficient, and it's not catching up with the accelerated nature and interconnected and international nature of the threat. One example, 5 years ago, when briefed of the counter-narcotics trends and the threats of TCOs, transnational criminal organizations, we were talking about cocaine and pathways through the Caribbean and the Pacific to the United States. It turns out that was true, but it wasn't nearly the whole picture. Now we see that those pathways had already changed. They were in containers. They were headed to Europe. They were headed to Asia. The market had dispersed. It had changed. Yet our own intelligence and information and solutions lagged that problem set by 5 years or more. What other things are we working on now that our knowledge, our understanding is lagging by 5, 10, 15 years? And how will we accelerate the change in the learning to make a difference? Papers, research, articles. So I look forward to day 2. I look forward to the learning, the partnerships, the friendships, and the action. And I thank FIU and Leland for hosting this and being an engine for change.